Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. Contact. Unauthorized emergence in Sector Egros. Every head in the command chamber turned. The name Egros froze the room. The alarm pierced the stillness of the Imperial Monitoring Command at exactly 0403. Red glyphs flared across the upper sensor grid, casting erratic reflections on the polished obsidian walls. Commander Tharex's mandibles twitched as he leaned forward, his four iridescent eyes focusing on the flashing anomaly. His voice, usually a monotone hum, cracked. An adjutant, a thin-furred yellery male named Kassel, scurried toward the central display. Multiple ships, 12 confirmed, human signature, lead vessel, UES Vostok. The room erupted, chairs scraped against the polished floors, holoscreens snapped into place, orders flew without direction. The humans had just emerged, clear as day, into the most forbidden quadrant in Imperial space, and they were not hiding. Admiral Varun stormed into the chamber, his cloak still half-folded, his tusks bared in confusion. "What in the frozen void is happening? Who gave clearance?" "No one," Tharex replied, claws moving rapidly across the input console. The emergence was unscheduled, coordinated. They arrived in perfect formation. A moment later, the transmission came through. 4 seconds, audio only, cold and surgical. Phase 2 initiated. Then, silence, only for a breath. The chamber erupted again. "Phase what?" barked Varun. "Is it a threat code? A countdown? Why only 4 seconds?" The phrase meant nothing, and yet, it meant everything. "What is Phase 2? Varun demanded. "Is it a threat? A declaration? Where is our linguistics team?" "They're parsing it now," Kassel answered, voice tight. "But it's coded, intentional. No Imperial database recognizes it." Behind them, 3 more Almirants filtered into the chamber, Rojal, Voskir, and human liaison Marvin Darnell, whose face had already paled to ash. Darnell didn't speak. The look in his eyes told a story none of them wanted to read. Tharex noticed the glance between Rojal and Kier. It lasted only a second, but in that second, something unspoken passed. They knew, at least part of it. Egros wasn't just a quarantined graveyard of missing ships and garbled sensor data. It was something deeper, older, and they'd buried it for a reason. Varun paced. "This is intentional, a stunt, psychological warfare, a message to the Council. The humans want a reaction." "Then don't give them one," Voskir offered, arms folded tightly across his segmented chest. "They just breached one of our highest interdictions," Varun snapped. "We must respond." "But what if that's exactly what they want?" Rojal countered. "They're not cloaked. They're broadcasting." Brazenly. "This is not an incursion. It's a performance." "An ultimatum," muttered Tharex. "A demonstration," added Kassel. Silence followed. On the upper screen, the Vostok and its accompanying ships floated like black blades in the void, sharp and symmetrical, too precise to be exploratory. Their positions traced a pattern the AI had not yet identified. It wasn't a blockade. It wasn't a battle formation. It was architectural. Marvin Darnell finally stepped forward, his voice a low rasp. "We should send a channel. Demand a response. If they don't answer, we flag it as a hostile operation." Varun nodded. "Do it." Seconds later, a diplomatic signal was routed directly to the Vostok. It was ignored. 2 more followed, then a third. Nothing. Kassel pulled up a secondary display. The ships remained fully powered. No active weapons, no evasive maneuvers, just holding position. "I want a tactical breakdown of their formation," Varun ordered, "and scramble the 7th Containment Fleet. If this is some sort of experiment, we'll shut it down ourselves." Across the command chamber, Rojal's voice cut through like a blade. "You'll provoke them." "We can't let them control the tempo," Varun shot back. "They already are." Darnell turned to the holomap, watching the slow drift of Imperial markers mobilizing toward Igros. We don't even know what they're doing. That's exactly why we must act. Rojal glanced again at Voskir. Neither spoke. Voskir's second eyelid fluttered, a tick Tharex had only seen once during the Varash crisis. The silence was louder than words, the same truth that had kept Igros sealed for decades. They weren't worried about what the humans were doing. They were terrified of why they were there at all. Because some secrets don't stay buried. Varun issued the final order. Full containment response. Intercept vectors authorized. If they do not yield, we escalate. Behind him, an aide hesitated before confirming. Sir, are you authorizing aggression against the United Earth Defense Forces? A beat of silence passed. Then Varun growled, I am authorizing enforcement of Imperial sovereignty. The humans have chosen their stage. In a less lit wing of the chamber, an archivist scrolled through restricted files marked decades old. Igros, Sector Code 7RI Theta. Last confirmed transmission from within, 41 years ago. Recovered fragments described impossible geometry. Energy patterns beyond spectral logic. Descriptions dismissed as sensor hallucinations. And now, the humans were there. Tharex pulled up a screen of the Vostok's layout. The ship was an upgraded Atlas-class dreadnought, but the core readings were wrong. Denser, shielded with alloys unknown to the database. Energy fields overlapping. Something else had been added. Something not meant for travel. They're not preparing to fight, Tharex said aloud. They're containing something. Varun scoffed. Contain what? There's nothing out there but gravitational anomalies and wreckage. But no one replied. Not Cassel, not Darnell, not Rojal. Because they had all seen the same file. And buried it. A red icon blinked at the edge of the Igros perimeter. 7th Fleet's forward wing, 5 minutes from engagement distance. Open visual comms to the fleet, Varun commanded. The screen shifted. Fleet Commander Jarek Thal appeared, blue-skinned, four-armed, rigid in posture. We're ready to initiate intercept, Thal stated. Approach and hold. Await final confirmation, Varun ordered. Understood. Then, something odd. On the sensors, the Vostok's formation adjusted slightly, imperceptible to the eye. But AI noticed. The geometry shifted inward, sharper angles, tighter spacing. Tharex looked up, alarm blooming in his chest. They're forming a boundary. Explain, Varun barked. It's not random, it's deliberate, and we're outside of it. Across the screen, a ripple of quiet passed through the fleet bridge. The humans weren't posturing, they weren't waiting. They were holding a line, but not against the Empire. Sir, Cassel interrupted, voice brittle, the phrase they transmitted, we may have a partial decryption. Varun turned sharply. Well? Kazel's eyes flitted to the screen. It's internal, an operation code name. Phase 1, Phase 2, sequential. Which means, this isn't just planning, it's execution. Phase 2 means Phase 1 already happened. Varun slammed a fist against the arm of his command chair. Then we should have seen it coming. Darnell didn't look up. We did. Varun turned to him. What? But Darnell only stared at the holoscreen. At the silent human ships forming their line in a graveyard of vanished empires. We just didn't want to admit it. No one responded. Not Cassel. Not Tharex. Not Rojal. Not Voskir. Because in that moment, every leader in the room knew the truth. The humans hadn't come to invade, intimidate, or provoke. They had come to do what the Empire never dared. They had come to stop something. And it was already too late. The image of the 7th Fleet shimmered and faded from the external monitors. Inside the war room of the UES Vostok, silence hung like gravity before storm. Commander Vander Brouwer stood alone at the central console, eyes fixed on a pulsing icon at the heart of Igros, a false calm overlaying a truth long understood. With a slow breath, he reached toward the console. The interface recognized his neural imprint, and unlocked the Phase 1 archive. "Authorization confirmed," the system intoned. A dozen holopanels blinked to life around him. Dim footage, drones drifting through cosmic fog, broken hulls suspended in dead orbits, metal that bent like flesh, still pulsing with residual energy. Vander didn't blink. Video feed 1, the wreckage of an Imperial survey cruiser, the ISS Varnath, disappeared 32 years ago. Its spine had been twisted into a spiral, as if something had reconfigured it mid-deconstruction. Vents had fused with cockpit glass. Bulkheads stretched unnaturally toward a core that was no longer there. Video feed 2, a HFY science vessel, its crew still visible through the hull, fused into the inner walls like organic wiring. The HFY, aquatic bipeds with translucent bone structures, now resembled grotesque ornaments in a machine they hadn't built. Log files streamed below each feed. Vander scanned silently. Rigzifia, classification, techno-evolutive parasite behavior, assimilative primary function, replication core structure, biomechanical neural matrix interaction protocol, hostile to all external interfaces, vulnerability, unknown 11 years of watching. 11 years of silence. Vander called up the original Sonda logs, the Genesis probes, launched covertly under Project Aegis. They'd moved blind into Igros, shielded by radiation masks and data shrouds. Each lasted less than a week. The first disappeared instantly. The second returned partial imagery, geometric structures drifting through gas fields, absorbing residual signals like a sponge. The third survived long enough to transmit conclusive data. Fusion marks, nano-intrusion scars, biological remnants stripped of identity, converted into frameworks. And at the center, nodes, pulsing faintly, identical in structure across dozens of sites. Not ships, not facilities. Hive cores, alive, breathing, and waiting. He toggled to the final Phase 1 report. A recording began. General Raoul Eddings, now deceased, leaned forward on a metal conference table. His voice was dry and steady. "If we tell the Empire, they'll study it, debate it, host a summit." Major Julian Carr spoke next, his left eye still bruised from an anti-riot strike on Arcturus Prime. "They'll send diplomats, sanction more containment, maybe lose a few more ships for the archives." "We've seen what happened on Trion Delta," added Commander Jung Yun. "The Empire delayed for 8 months. We lost 17,000 colonists before they greenlit a response. By then, the Myrex swarm had doubled in size." Captain Dmitry Valen nodded once. "We consult the Empire, we wait, and if we wait, we lose." Then the room went quiet. At the far end of the table, Vander sat with hands folded. He hadn't spoken during the entire exchange. Eddings leaned toward him. "Your call, Commander. The fleet's yours. We don't launch unless you sign." Vander's gaze swept the table. He met each man's eyes in turn, as if weighing not their words, but the weight they carried. Then he said flatly, "If we're going to die, let it be doing what no one else had the courage to face." He reached forward and pressed his fingerprint to the launch key. No debate followed. The recording ended. The console dimmed. In the war room of the UES Vostok, Vander remained still for a moment longer. Then, without a word, he tapped the archive closed. The screen faded to black. He stared at the reflection of his own face, weathered, unblinking, then turned and walked out. The corridor outside was quiet, bathed in the cold blues of standby mode. Officers passed in silence, eyes forward, posture composed. Not one among them had been forced aboard. Every member of the Vostok's crew had signed on with full knowledge of the mission. Lieutenant Harrow Jensen, barely 30, moved along the port gantry with a diagnostic tablet in hand. Formerly stationed on Europa's orbit ring, transferred after losing 2 brothers during the Voshan border siege. Corporal Richard Day inspected a drone cluster near the lower hull. Once an asteroid miner, his hands still bore the calluses from plasma torch operation. His eldest son was enrolled in Earth's orbital academy. Specialist Marla Nakembe, the only civilian technician authorized for onboard AI optimization, moved between modules silently. Her daughter was 7. She wore no ring. The crew mess hall, now half-lit, was silent save for the hiss of water filters and the soft hum of the ship's core systems. A young communications officer, Ensign Paul Cortez, sat alone at one end of a table, a photo wedged into the edge of a monitor. A woman with an infant wrapped in a green blanket. "When he grows up," he said quietly to no one, "it'll be a better world." On the forward bridge, Vander stepped into position behind the primary display. Tactical overlays pulsed along the curved glass wall. Formation, stable. Containment geometry, locked. No Imperial units within strike range. No anomalies detected. He paused beside the primary weapons officer, Sergeant Malik Fraser. The man glanced up. Vander said nothing, just placed a hand briefly on Fraser's shoulder, then moved on. As he passed the helm, he stopped beside Ensign Eli Tarrin, barely 22 with sweat along his brow despite the cool air. Vander didn't speak. He watched the young man's trembling fingers for a moment, then murmured, "Your father would be proud." Tarrin didn't reply. He nodded once and steadied his hands. Below in engineering, Chief Horst Kellerman adjusted the capacitors lining the null conversion chamber. The core hummed like a restrained animal. His voice was calm, but recorded. "To my daughter Annika, your father did something that mattered." His fingers moved over the console, finishing the message before encrypting it to Earth's relay node. By the time Vander returned to the war room, all systems were green. The moment was approaching, the calm before movement. No signals, no disruptions, just the stillness of a trap about to spring, one that had waited 11 years for its prey to stir. He stood alone again in the center of the room and waited. The third Imperial diplomatic transmission was met with the same response as the first two: silence. On the central screen of the Galactic Foreign Relations Hall, the hailing loop expired with a dull tone. Ambassador Rathan Chal tapped his lower jaw in irritation, the cartilage ridges along his temples pulsing with strain. "They're not answering," he muttered, more to himself than to the assembled chamber of advisors. Councillor Maver Ekar, a thick-shelled Threxian male with hardened orange plating and no tolerance for ambiguity, emitted a low, clicking rasp. "Perhaps because they have no intention of talking. Or perhaps because they're waiting for us to misstep," answered Ambassador Harin Vorsk, the human representative assigned to the Interstellar Council's liaison panel. He adjusted his collar but said nothing more. No one asked him to elaborate. Overhead, on the grand broadcast dome of the diplomatic chamber, the image of the UES Vostok and her companion vessels hovered in cold precision. They remained unchanged. No power fluctuations, no transmissions. Their formation, still geometrically perfect, spoke not of aggression, but orchestration. A junior aide entered and whispered into Charles' ear. The ambassador blinked, then turned to address the chamber. "They've officially ignored all contact attempts. The diplomatic protocol clock has expired. We are now advised by Defense Command to proceed to defensive posture review." Councillor Ekar banged a heavy fist against the console. "This is an act of war." "Is it?" replied Vorsk, eyes narrowing. "They've fired no weapons, crossed no borders that weren't already declared off limits by our own bureaucracy. And we," he gestured at the chamber, "are the ones still trying to understand what Phase 2 means." From a recessed gallery, Admiral Kolar Drev finally spoke. His voice was slow, deliberate, like someone counting the weight of his words in years rather than minutes. "They know something we don't," he said. The chamber stilled. Kolar's skin was pale blue, worn thin at the edges from exposure to stellar radiation decades earlier. His implants buzzed faintly when he turned his head, the old neural ports along his spine blinking in uneven rhythm. He had served through the Zivak Wars, through the Rune Rebellions, through the failed annexation of Lys Sector. He was not prone to panic. Then we must act, Councillor Eckhar insisted. To what end? Kolar asked calmly. They are not preparing to attack us. They are waiting. In another chamber, light years away, news anchors blinked under bright studio lights as their broadcasts streamed across thousands of systems. The Galactic Network's lead program, Threat or Tragedy, displayed side-by-side footage. The Vostok's formation juxtaposed against archival imagery of Terran military strikes from 2 decades earlier. This wouldn't be the first time humanity acted unilaterally, intoned a Lakari host with silver-gray skin and filamented facial markings. The colonies of Helios 4, the proxy fleet in the Aureus Belt. Many remember those decisions. A Narsen co-anchor, her segmented pupils dilating in discomfort, offered, "But to enter Igros, a region under official quarantine, some are calling this an act of defiance." A voxel commentator snarled from another feed, "It's an act of arrogance." Civilians across the galaxy watched in curiosity and fear. In a refugee ship docked over Sarnis IV, a boy asked his father if the humans were the bad guys. The man didn't answer. On merchant docks, orbital habitats, academic forums, debates flared. Was this another human power grab? A covert operation gone wrong? Or had the Empire allowed a threat to fester too long? On board the Imperial flagship Endurance, orbiting just outside the edge of Igros, Commander Jerrik Thal stood in front of a projected map of the sector. The human fleet had not moved. Imperial containment forces, in contrast, had now assembled across 3 vectors. Thal's second officer, a dark-plated Zirith named Olan Rag, tapped his terminal. "They remain in formation," Rag reported. "Not a single deviation. Power signatures remain constant. No heat fluctuations, no shifts in shield alignment." "Have they reacted to our approach?" Thal asked. "Not even slightly." Another officer chimed in. "Sir, we are in full sensor range. They can see us. They're choosing not to respond." Thal nodded. "Then they are not afraid." In the strategic command room back on the capital moon of Varaxis, political advisors, military strategists, and media liaisons jostled for room around a long, crescent-shaped table. High Consul Aaron Vell, a human raised within the Imperial core, spoke above the din. "We need a public position, immediately. If we delay further, we'll look disorganized." "More disorganized than launching a fleet without understanding the threat?" asked Field Marshal Doran Val, a towering Morvani with white-plated armor fused directly into his back. A tactical analyst stood, projecting a 3-dimensional render of the human formation. "Their ships form a containment arc. Based on their current alignment, it isn't offensive. It's surgical, like a perimeter." "Perimeter around what?" another voice asked. "That's the point," the analyst replied. "Whatever they're facing, it's not us." The room fell still. Ambassador Charles' voice filtered through the interlink network. "The diplomatic corps has received no response, no acknowledgement. They are ignoring us entirely." Another message followed, this one from Media Intelligence. "Civilian unrest is growing in 12 systems. The dominant narrative is shifting. They see this as either imperial negligence or human militarism. We are losing control of the story." "Then change the story," Aaron Vell said flatly. "We reposition. We name it a violation of treaty space, and we respond with the necessary show of force." Even Admiral Kolar Drev did not oppose this time. He merely stared at the feed. The humans had stopped transmitting. They weren't playing the game anymore. Back aboard the Endurance, Commander Thal watched the tactical feed as his fleet reached optimal position. Behind him, Rog stiffened. "Human transmission has ceased entirely." Thal blinked. "Channels jammed?" "No, just silent." Thal looked back at the formation. Not a flicker of hesitation. The Vostok remained at the center, dark, focused, deliberate. He opened a comlink to the diplomatic wing. "They know we're watching, and still, they do nothing." On the diplomatic side, Ambassador Vorsk replied calmly. Then that silence is the loudest message we've received. He paused, then added, and we still don't know if it's a warning or a farewell. In the Imperial Grand Council, news of the silence spread. No more signals, no automated transponders. The Terran fleet had vanished from the network. They're cutting us out, said Charles, not hiding the edge in his voice. Or cutting us off, someone whispered. Across the chamber, no one looked up. Even the aides had stopped typing. Outside the Egros perimeter, the fleet of the Empire drifted steadily forward. Protocol dictated positioning within engagement range. No one spoke of firing. No one spoke of standing down. They were still pretending they were in control. Inside the Vostok, the silence remained. Unyielding, absolute, final. And across the Empire, no one had the words to answer it. The interior of the UES Vostok was calm in a way that made even the sound of breath feel intrusive. Outside, Imperial fleets drifted closer with cautious precision, broadcasting silence with every passing second. Inside, no one waited for new orders. Everything that could be decided had been. In the command bridge, the atmosphere was surgical. Cool lights traced thin veins across the matte black walls, illuminating each crew station with soft discipline. The main view screen showed the vast dead center of Egros. Silent, starless, motionless. The fleet had reached the epicenter. Every ship in the human formation now hovered in locked anchor geometry, synchronized with subatomic precision. The containment field remained inactive. Chief Engineer Horst Kellerman stood beneath the secondary core chamber, arms crossed as diagnostics crawled across his interface. His voice echoed across the engineering channel with calm authority. Final inspection complete. Field system integrity at 100%. Fusion relays primed. Stabilizer matrix steady. Positioning stable across all nodes. He paused. Field activation is contingent on perimeter geometry remaining intact and Commander Brower's neural interface signal present at core relay. Manual override has been disabled. Lieutenant Darian Cole, posted beside the thermal calibration core, nodded. All systems green. De Kellerman glanced once toward the central processor sphere, watching the slow pulse of ambient light. Then he turned off the internal mic and tapped a private recording node. To my daughter Annika, he said, voice low. You won't remember me. And maybe that's a mercy. But if someone ever tells you what we did here, I want you to know it wasn't war. We came to stop something worse. He stared at the recording light a moment longer, then pressed send. The encrypted burst disappeared into the relay system, routed for Earth. He turned back to the console. There was still work to be done. Above, on Deck 1, the mess hall was nearly empty. The only sound was the muted hum of life support systems. Lieutenant James Halvern sat at a corner table, shoulders hunched forward, a folded photo in his hands. He held it just long enough for his companions to see before tucking it back into the inner flap of his uniform. A baby, eyes shut, wrapped in a green blanket. My son's name is Theo, Halvern said quietly, then offered the smallest smile. When he grows up, it'll be a better world. Across the table, Corporal Milo Vasquez drew a slow breath, then lifted his coffee bulb in silent agreement. On the bridge, Commander Vander Brouwer stepped forward from the rear alcove without a word. He crossed the floor slowly, stopping at each station in turn. His steps made no sound against the padded deck. He placed a hand lightly on Sergeant Malik Fraser's shoulder and moved on. No need for words. Fraser nodded once and returned to monitoring the outer layer of the gravitational shell. At the helm, Ensign Eli Tarrin kept his eyes forward, hands steady over the control field. A bead of sweat traced down his cheek. Vander paused at his station, gaze steady. Your father would be proud, he said, voice low. Tarrin didn't answer. He held still for a moment, then gave a small nod. Vander continued down the line, pausing beside each crewman. To most, he said nothing. Only a nod, a moment of quiet recognition. A gesture. A bridge. He stepped past the operations panel, rounded the comm station, and reached the front of the bridge. There, a wide observation window stretched before him. Beyond it, Igros waited. Vast, silent, empty as the grave. He stopped. For the first time in hours, Vander allowed his eyes to rest. There was nothing to see, no stars, no debris, just space, devoured by silence. The kind of silence that wasn't absence, but pressure, a waiting shape. He stood there alone, watching nothing, as the air behind him hummed with the kind of focus that left no room for error. The men didn't speak unless necessary. They knew what this was. Every word now felt too expensive. Inside the auxiliary command chamber, systems analyst Tom Renner finalized alignment matrices. His assistant, specialist Ada Velez, confirmed capacitor sync and nodded. "Diagnostics clean," she said. "Zero error margin," Renner replied. "Same as yesterday, same as the last 10. Ada looked up at him. "So what are we waiting for?" Renner hesitated, then answered, "Something that doesn't wake on schedule." In his private quarters, Commander Vander's log terminal blinked with a faint blue light. He didn't use it. His last log entry had been recorded 2 days prior. It remained unedited, untouched. Vessel, U.S. Vostok, Commander Vander Brouwer. Log entry, Darfur War 43. Status, final operations window. Fleet has reached formation apex. Field systems pre-armed. Human crew at readiness. I have no further adjustments to make. This mission was never about returning. If we fail, no one will retrieve us. If we succeed, they won't need to. I leave behind no instructions, no justification. Only the outcome will speak for us. He had saved the entry without reviewing it. No playback, just finality. In the central briefing bay, 2 junior officers reviewed position data. Lieutenant Jalen Corin, soft-spoken and formerly a field physicist, traced orbital alignment curves with practiced care. His partner, nav specialist Aran Desai, tapped through threat proximity graphs. "Zero variance," Corin said. Desai nodded. Still locked. The room was filled with quiet certainty. No one speculated, no one projected. They were not preparing. They were waiting. At 1400 ship time, the final confirmation signal was received from the outermost support vessel. Frigate Harland. Position confirmed. Formation held. Structural linkage active. All systems stable. The message came across encrypted command band. Fleet position lock. Achieved convergence line. Aligned primary relay. Awaits neural confirmation. Commander Vander, now seated once more on the bridge, reviewed the update. He did not respond. He already had. The Vostok's hull vibrated with ambient resonance from the still dormant field core. It was quiet, subtle, a pressure in the bones. Every man on board could feel it, a frequency just beneath hearing, the edge of something pressing in, like a breath held by the void itself. They had reached the threshold. Beyond it waited a silence that didn't listen, only consumed, and there was nothing more to say. The first tremor hit at 02:19 ship time. It wasn't a quake, not physical, but every man aboard the UES Vostok felt it, like the air had been stretched, then snapped, like a breath caught in a throat that wasn't human. On the bridge, the lighting flickered once, then again, not power loss, interference. Ensign Eli Terran's voice broke the silence. "Commander, we have distortion shift in Quadrant 3. Subdimensional variance spiking." "Visuals," Vander said. The main screen snapped to life. Black space twisted. No stars, no shapes, just a ripple that bent perception itself. It shimmered like heat above asphalt, then folded into itself and ruptured outward. "They're waking," said Sergeant Malik Fraser from Tactical. A low-frequency hum rolled through the hull, deep, steady, unnatural. Then the grav field snapped. The ship jolted. "Grav fluctuation," shouted Lieutenant Davin Price. We just dropped 0.05. External vectors destabilizing. In engineering, alarms blinked red across the containment relays. Chief Kellerman gripped the side of the console. "It's here," he muttered. "That's not drift. It's resonance." Above Igros's core, space itself cracked open. Structures rose. Not ships, not machines. Things. They pulled themselves from beneath the distortion field, not launched or propelled, but grown. Massive spires of blackened steel and ivory plating twisted together into towering limbs. Segments uncoiled like vertebrae made of engines. Within each structure, organic flickers, eyes that weren't eyes, hives behind transparent alloy, core mines encased in pulsating webs of titanium sinew. The Rexifia had awakened. "Target signature locked," called Fraser. "Multiple contacts. No consistent shape. Reconfiguration in real time." On the screen, one of the entities split down its center, then reformed, gaining new propulsion limbs, shredding old ones in the process. "Telemetry feeds corrupting," said Terran. "It's rewriting sensor logic. Our definitions don't apply." The Vostok's AI stuttered mid-sentence, then again, then fell silent. All across the fleet, automated systems dimmed. "Transmissions are glitching," said Specialist Corin from the communications desk. "Encryption loops are... Commander, something is interfering with our logic cores." "Fall back to manual ops," Vander ordered. "Now." Alarms rippled through the other human ships. In the UES Aldrin, Captain Hecht barked for weapons hot. In the UES Ravel, flight crews scrambled to their launch bays, locking into formation. Above them, a Rexifia construct spun in place, then launched metallic tendrils toward the nearest ship, tentacle-like masses that fused and burrowed through armor in seconds. "Field breach on Arclight-class frigate," came the report. "Hull compromise in progress. Interior biomass assimilation underway." "They're not attacking with weapons," muttered Vander. "They're consuming." He stepped forward. "Engage containment plan. All ships into perimeter mode. Lock zones. Keep them inside the radius." Fraser tapped a sequence of commands into tactical. Fleet-wide sync initiating. All units aligning. Across space, the human formation tightened like a noose. One of the Rexifia constructs tried to ascend, lifting on grav thrusters formed moments before. The UES Dakar adjusted angle and fired. Twin pulse cannons lanced the flank of the structure, breaking its lift pattern. It dropped back into the containment pocket. "Confirmed impact," Price said. "Pulse field did minimal damage, but trajectory altered. Containment re-established." "They're testing us," said Fraser. "Every second we give them, they learn." Another construct emerged. This one narrower, sleeker, with rotating limbs that ended in high-frequency emitters. It spun once, released a burst that knocked out 5 human drones in a single flash, then turned toward the fleet edge. "They're trying to breach the net," Corin said. "Block them," Vander said. "Now." The UES Mariner shifted. Its forward coil guns lit up, sending a staggered burst into the approaching entity. Moments later, 2 auxiliary ships, Nassau and Idris, flanked the gap and restored perimeter geometry. Then, from beneath Igros's surface, a wave of energy burst upward, blue, jagged, raw. The main view screen trembled. "That's not standard power," said Price. That's a core mind booting itself." Kellerman's voice came over internal comms. "Containment field is still viable, but we're near the threshold. If more of them surface, we lose sync." On the main screen, a third Rexifia construct erupted through the distortion zone, twice the size of the others. It bore the scars of 10 civilizations: human hull plates, Vakari shielding, Dominion ventrals. Fragments of extinct tech woven like bone, all fused into one verdict in motion. "They've integrated everything they absorbed," Vander said. "That thing's not a ship, it's a weapon." Silence fell across the bridge, then Vander broke it. "Phase 2 offensive. Lock positions. No exits." Across the fleet, the command echoed. Dozens of ships reoriented, vectors locked, a chorus of human precision in the face of impossible chaos. The UES Vostok surged forward, engines flaring. The lead position in the trap. Inside, no one cheered. No one raised their voice. They all moved with one thought. This was what they were built for. They just moved. Because they'd always known this moment would come. Now it had a shape, and they were already inside it. The UES Vostok's hull vibrated with tension as the containment formation locked into its final shape. In every direction, human ships held their vector, still, exact, unwavering. Between them, the Rexifia pressed. Inside the Vostok, the tension had become something tactile. It clung to skin, to breath. The hum of the containment lattice now trembled at the edge of overload. One wrong shift, one misaligned trajectory, and the perimeter would collapse. On the tactical deck, Sergeant Malik Fraser ran updates manually across the projection wall. All field nodes active. Sync pulse holding at 99.3. We are at margin, Commander. Hold the line, Vander said. At that instant, a Rexifia construct tore through the upper quadrant, its structure shifting mid-flight, new limbs unfolding, armor flexing into spikes. It rushed the outer boundary. The UES Griffin, an older B-class frigate, pivoted hard into its path. The maneuver was intentional, calculated. Griffin's thrusters at full burn, Fraser called out. Vector intercept confirmed. The impact wasn't cinematic, it wasn't clean. The Griffin drove into the Rexifia at an angle, its reinforced hull shearing through the construct's external membrane. Plasma erupted in jagged flares. Tendrils wrapped around the human ship like veins reacting to a wound. Then both objects tumbled, locked, convulsing, until the Griffin's core detonated. A flash, a wave, silence. Terran at the helm whispered, "They knew." No one answered. On the external feed, the space it died in held. The construct had been pulled back inside the activation radius. One less breach, one less failure. Vander stepped closer to the screen. No flicker crossed his face. Before anyone could speak, a new alert blinked red on the right-hand panel. "Replicator node detected," said Fraser. "They're spawning. Bottom arc, Zone 4. Across the field, the UES Janus, a recon vessel refitted for field modulation, veered off its assigned track. "Janus is breaking formation," Terran said. "Sir?" "They're not running," Vander replied. The Janus dropped speed. Its reactor signature spiked. "She's charging a core inversion," said Fraser. "Field overload. She's going to cook the node from inside." The Rexifia cluster swarmed. Filaments snapped through vacuum toward the Janus, but they were too late. A bright surge burst from the Janus's core. White, silent, perfect. The vessel didn't explode. It unraveled, collapsed in on itself like light into a black hole. The replicator node at its center blinked out. Fraser whispered, "Node eliminated." The communications feed crackled. Open channel, no encryption. All field layers operational. Nassau and Idris rotating to patch perimeter. Suggest full sync lock and fallback sync on Tier 3 relay. The voice cut off. Static returned. "Confirm loss of the Janus," Vander said. "Confirmed," said Corin from comms. "No residual signal." Another moment passed in silence. The bridge dimmed slightly, reactive power redistribution compensating. "Two ships gone," Price said. "Two holes plugged," Fraser answered. Vander reached up and keyed the broadcast system. His voice filled every deck of the Vostok and echoed across the fleet. They knew the risk and fulfilled it to the end. Now, it's on us. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. He released the button and stared ahead. A beat passed. Then reports returned. "Mariner confirming position. Dakar ready on inner loop. Relay sync aligned. Pulse integrity holding." Every station on the Vostok echoed with murmured confirmations, technicians and officers whispering checklists, gripping protocol like a rope during flood. In engineering, Chief Kellerman stood with both hands on the core controls. His team worked in silence. Specialist Ada Velez nodded once. Field density locked. Hold it there, Kellerman said. We keep the cage closed. Nothing slips the bars. Outside, the Rexifia responded. Their forms began to shimmer, first subtly, then violently. Limbs fragmented, split, reformed. Their logic had shifted. They weren't fleeing, they were adapting. They're trying to decode the field's modulation, Fraser said. Make it harder, Vander replied. Terran, oscillate our node by 4 degrees. Randomize every 3 seconds. Yes, sir. The Vostok trembled as the core shifted frequencies. The containment lines flickered briefly, then pulsed brighter. One of the Rexifia constructs extended a new set of limbs, thin, razor-edged, toward the eastern arc. It launched forward. Trajectory breach possible, warned Price. Interceptors out of position, Fraser said. Then the UES Vernon, a support ship not designed for combat, rotated out of line and surged ahead. Vernon's accelerating. She's cutting off the angle, Corin confirmed. The Vernon slammed sideways into the creature's path. No weapons, just mass, just placement. The Rexifia recoiled mid-flight, clipped by the Vernon's flank. The ship cracked in half from the strain, its bow tumbling as the stern held position for 1 more second. Just enough time for the containment sink to pulse again and reseal the breach. Vernon lost, Fraser said, voice thin. Vander said nothing, just stared. On the auxiliary monitor, the perimeter diagram continued to pulse. The humans were down 3 ships, but the formation held. They're running out of adaptations, Price muttered. No, Vander said. They're running out of time. Behind him, the system's display lit up with a new alert. Convergence field. Ready all units in position. Primary core. Stable neural confirmation. Standing by. Fraser looked up. We're there, sir. Vander didn't answer immediately. His eyes lingered on the red pings. Griffin, Janus, Vernon. 3 gone, 3 exact. Then, with a voice that carried the weight of all 3, hold the line, final sync. Nothing moves until I say. Outside, the Rexifia were no longer pressing. They were scattering, reacting. Their bodies now morphing faster than before, twisting into unfamiliar shapes, shredding and reforming in patterns that looked increasingly frantic. They knew. And now, it was only a matter of seconds. The final synchronization alert faded into the still air of the bridge. No one moved. Every station glowed with ready signals. Across the fleet, not a single ship adjusted course. They were exactly where they needed to be. Inside the UES Vostok, the silence was absolute. No alarms, no voices. Just the soft pulse of energy along the containment grid and the quiet breath of men waiting to vanish. Commander Vander Brouwer stood at the center of the command deck, framed by the main viewport, a black window into a sector that no longer obeyed known physics. Outside, the Rexifia twisted and convulsed against the invisible cage, their forms collapsing and blooming like nightmares in reverse. They no longer attacked. They struggled to comprehend. The time had come. Vander reached to the central console. One touch brought up the fleet-wide transmission array. He activated the channel. A faint chime confirmed open broadcast. Across all human ships, the same voice spoke. This is Commander Vander Brouwer of the UES Vostok. To all surviving units, your stations are confirmed. Field geometry is intact, integrity holding at threshold. He paused. The static of the line was met only by the low hiss of ventilators and the occasional beep of status lights. Then he spoke again, slower now, firmer. We were never meant to survive this. That was never the point. Every one of you knew the odds. Every one of you signed on knowing the cost. And yet, you came. Around the bridge, no one moved. Sergeant Fraser's hands gripped the edge of the tactical panel. Terran at the helm stared forward, motionless. Lieutenant Price said nothing, his gaze locked on the screen. In every war, there comes a moment when someone has to stop the fall. No reinforcements, No applause. Just a wall that holds long enough for something better to follow. He glanced at the display again. Red markers blinking where Griffin, Janus, and Vernon had once stood. You are that wall. And in the years to come, when the stars shift and empires rewrite their records, there will still be a truth they can't erase. He stepped forward once, eyes steady on the viewport. That when the galaxy stood on the edge, humanity held the line. No cheers followed, only the quiet whir of stabilizers, the breath of a dozen men in stillness. Vander's hand hovered over the command pad. He pressed 3 keys, confirming primary core access. By authority of the Earth Defense High Command, final sequence is green. He turned to Fraser. Confirm status. Field saturation at max. Pulse harmonics locked. Subdimensional seal engaged. System awaits neural trigger. Vander gave a small nod. He stepped toward the core interface and placed his hand on the biometric panel. The console flared. Neural imprint confirmed, the system announced. Commander on circuit. Awaiting final authorization. Karan's voice came softly. Sir. Vander looked across the room. He saw them all. Not soldiers anymore. Just men. Just names. Transmit final record. Karan nodded, voice almost inaudible. Recording live. Vander took a breath. For generations, the galaxy and humanity will remember our sacrifice. He touched the last command. Activate. The room dimmed instantly. The deck vibrated, subtle and rising. Lights pulsed red. Across space, a low-frequency hum spread like thunder without sound. One by one, the ships of the human fleet vanished in brilliance. Energy cores igniting in perfect sync. Not as explosions, not as collapse, but as containment. Across the command network, signal after signal blinked out. Status lights darkened. Transmission bands fell silent. The fleet was gone, but the pattern held. The convergence field surged inward. Fraser closed his eyes. Terran whispered a name, too soft to catch but clear in meaning. Then he closed his eyes. Just a man, at his post. Price didn't move, hands steady on his console. In engineering, Kellerman kept his eyes open until the last second, watching the core stabilize. Velez beside him cried without a sound. Around them, the walls of the ship began to shimmer, not with heat or pressure, but with the subtle dissonance of spatial collapse. Objects lost their shadows. The edges of bulkheads blurred. Time inside the Vostok slowed by fractions that couldn't be measured, only felt. Instruments began to desync. Readings froze mid-digit. On the main interface, the Vostok's core relay flickered once. Final transmission. Convergence achieved. System offline. Silence across the board. No signal. No pulse. The UES Vostok was gone. Absolute. Complete. Irreversible. Outside, the containment array folded inward. An implosion not of matter, but of dimensional cohesion. Reality stuttered, hiccuped like a broken frame, then began to fold inward. On the outer perimeter of Igros, where gravity still behaved, the Imperial fleet decelerated in formation. From the bridge of the Endurance, Commander Jarek Thal watched his screens glitch, then go white. The distant distortion was visible even to the naked eye now, ribbons of light curling into a center that should not have existed. "What is that?" whispered his second, Olin Rog, his skin plates flexing involuntarily in fear. The edges of every star in sensor range began to flicker. Proximity fields failed. No coordinates updated. Ships no longer had speed or distance, just orientation, just presence. No one spoke. No weapon fired. No order given. The sensors lost all coherence. Spatial telemetry dissolved. For one instant, every Imperial ship felt weightless. Then, all readings flatlined. In the void above Igros, there was light. Then there was not. The light vanished in less than a second. Where the UES Vostok and its fleet had held the line, there was now nothing. No debris, No radiation signature, no wreckage, just space, flat, silent, untouched by any standard of physics the galaxy still recognized. Across the command decks of the Imperial fleet, the shock was not spoken. It was endured. On board the Endurance, Commander Jarek Thal stared at a black screen. His hands had stopped moving minutes ago. Every diagnostic returned null. Every recalibration failed. The sensors didn't break. They no longer had anything to see. The sector of Egros had folded in on itself. From orbit, even light from the surrounding stars bent around its core, drawn inward and swallowed like breath underwater. The explosion had not radiated outward. It had collapsed into convergence. And when it was over, it was over. Not a trace left to explain it. The Rexifia were gone. The human ships, gone. And Egros, once marked as cursed, quarantined and ignored, now read on every Imperial navigation system as simply unavailable. In the high halls of the Galactic Assembly on Varaxis Prime, debate turned quickly into containment. Admiral Voskier, eyes ringed with sleepless fatigue, addressed the Emergency Council. His voice was low, crisp, as always. The Earth Defense Forces initiated an unsanctioned incursion into a prohibited sector. The resulting anomaly has rendered the region non-navigable and permanently destabilized. Our current recommendation is formal censure. High Consul Rael Kor, a Corlean male with translucent blue skin and sensory gills layered down his neck, responded without inflection. And the nature of the anomaly itself? We don't know, said Admiral Rojal from the opposite flank of the chamber. Nothing remains. No spectral data, no molecular remnants. Egros is empty. Another voice spoke. Diplomat Haran Vorsk, still marked by Terran features, though groomed in the ways of the Imperial Corps. We may never understand what they contained, but we should remember there was something worth containing. Voskir cut in sharply. This wasn't defense, it was aggression. Violation of Interstellar Doctrine, Section 41, unilateral deployment of weaponized vessels. Humanity must answer. A silence followed. Council members exchanged glances, not of agreement, of fear, because no one knew what had been stopped, or if it had been. On Earth, no explanation was issued, no press conference, no public broadcast, just a date, and then a name. A long white spire was raised in orbit above the Atlantic Arc. It bore no flag, no insignia, no anthem, only a continuous projection of names, one after another, scrolled slowly across its surface. Each name matched to a voice. The voice was always the same, Vander Brouwer. The audio was clipped from his final transmission, a single sentence, repeated every hour. For generations, the galaxy and humanity will remember our sacrifice. It played without music, without fade, just words. In the viewing gallery of the Earth Memorial Dock, civilians stood behind a pressure glass wall that overlooked the column. They didn't speak. Some reached out, fingertips against the glass as if trying to find someone in the reflection. In Johannesburg, children in schools were given time to observe the projection broadcast. In the colonies of New Canaan and Arcturus Theta, families tuned to a signal called Vostok Stream, which repeated only the same three things: the names, the voice, and the silence that followed. And in the outer belt, where mining ships once vanished into the deep, workers watched the sky from the cargo decks of rigs that had once feared every jump near Egros. Now, they watched it in silence. Deep within the Earth Defense Command, where public eyes did not reach, construction had already begun. Blueprints for a new class of vessel, undisclosed, unregistered. No drive signature, no hull classification, just a code name. Nemia. One man stood before the projection array, arms crossed. General Marcus Hale, former strategy director of the Aegis program and one of the last men to speak with Vander before Phase 2 launched. Beside him, Admiral Tolan Black reviewed telemetry data from the final pulse field. "There's nothing left," Tolan said quietly. "I know." No survivors, no signals, not even decay. I know. Hale finally turned toward the schematic. They did what they had to do. Tolan hesitated. Do you think it held? Hale answered without looking away. It held long enough. He tapped the display. And if it doesn't next time, we won't contain it. The projection shimmered. A new designation appeared under the NEMIA file. Phase 3, Eradication Protocol. In the classified records of the Imperial Assembly, the Egros incident was officially categorized under Category 5 Diplomatic Conflict, Unresolved. The Terran account was not requested. The matter was closed. But in back channels and encrypted traffic, rumors traveled faster than light. That the humans had faced something ancient. That the Empire had known more than it admitted. That one dreadnought had held off extinction. On the edges of explored space, cartographer drones from minor systems continued to ping the coordinates once marked as Egros. Each time, they returned the same message: no data. At Earth Memorial Station, the names of the fallen still cycle every night. No flag above them, no music beneath. Just the echo of a voice, carved into the quiet between stars. For generations, the galaxy and humanity will remember our sacrifice. And far beyond that sky, buried deep within a silence made not of distance but of design, something sleeps and waits. And when it stirs again, containment will not be the mission. It will be Phase 3. Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Oh, and one last thing. Every great soldier knows that to survive and become a hero, taking care of yourself is key. So before you go, check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's important. And I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.